Hello, Tad. It's so nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You are the co-founder and former CEO of iLab. Why did you start iLab?
I was working in consulting at the time, my first job out of college, and a good friend of mine named Andreas, he was working in a research lab at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, which is Harvard's main affiliated research hospital focused specifically on cancer. And he was working in a laboratory, and they had just a whole lot of inefficient processes there where stuff was happening through spreadsheets, through paper signups, through things like that. And he had started, rather than spending most of his time actually conducting the scientific research, just spending his time coding different solutions in FileMaker and things like that to try and make the lab run more efficiently. And so as we looked at it, I decided I wanted to move on from consulting. It's typically a 2 or 3 year gig when you first start there. The typical path would be to go to business school. And I was kind of going down that path, but I said, I'd done a lot of casework and analyzing things. I'd love a chance at actually trying to roll up my sleeves and build a business. And so we felt like there was a significant unmet need here. And in talking with the administration of the Dana-Farber, they said, hey, great, if you can build solutions to these few problems here, we will gladly buy them for you, and we will gladly let you sell them to someone else. We just want these solutions to exist. So we figured, at the time, I was thinking, okay, rather than going to business school, I'll just take a couple years, I'll do this, it won't work out, and then I'll go back to consulting and kind of get on the career path. It's funny, our growth path was, we grew almost exactly 50% every year for 10 years. And so the first year, we went from 20,000 in revenue to 30,000 in revenue, and then 30 to 45,000. So it was a tough slog at the beginning, but when you get to the end and you're going, 3 million to 4.5 million to 7 million, then it becomes, a lot more satisfying growth, right?
That's a perfect segue into, it's a tough industry, yeah. Right? That's a hard area to crack. How did you scale the business? As
we were working there and we were getting some traction, again, we were talking with the leadership of a couple of our early clients, and they're saying, hey, what you're selling now is fine, this e-procurement, but nobody is providing this core facility management software. And what core facilities mean in a scientific sense is shared resources. So if you think of a big research hospital or university, they will have some very expensive, $1 million pieces of equipment, whether they're DNA sequencers or microscopes or mouse colonies. And if you have 1,000 professors running labs, they can't each be buying $10 million worth of equipment. So the university or the hospital will buy those centrally, and then they will basically let all of their in-house researchers use them on a by the hour or by the sample basis. And what our software did was it helped to manage the shared usage of those. And a lot of it came down to booking time and then creating reports about who's using what and billing for those. Sloan Kettering and Dana-Farber, which are two of the best cancer hospitals in the world, were early clients of ours. So because we were able to start with them and that sort of brand reputation, when you're talking to somebody at another university, you say, okay, well, it's good enough for Dana-Farber, it's good enough for Stanford, it's good enough for Harvard, then you were able to, expand relatively quickly from there.
When did you know that it was going to be successful and you were going to want an exit?
I would say probably for the first 4 or 5 years, our philosophy was, hey, this will be a great experience. We worked with our friends, we learned a lot, we had an impact, but if at some point it doesn't work out, no harm, no foul, we'll move on. I think then there became a point, and this was probably around the time we started engaging with SEG, where it moved from that philosophy of, hey, this is a fun experience, to, no, we really do want a good exit here, when it became, hey, the majority of my net worth is tied up in this one illiquid microcap stock, and I really don't want that to go to zero. And so I think we started to, think more about potential exit opportunities.
Why did you choose to work with Software Equity Group?
There were really 3 factors there. One is I was familiar with them from having received a couple of years of mentorship prior. Second is that the kinds of companies they work with in terms of being a pure play SaaS and in terms of the revenue range were squarely in line with where we were. And so I thought we'd be a good client fit. And then third is I really wanted to work with a bank that was not going to learn anything new through this process. And so, I looked at some regional banks, for example, but I felt there was going to be too much of a learning curve on SaaS and on the SaaS dynamics. But I felt SEG had seen this movie before and would know all the steps along the way that we need to follow.
You're a Harvard graduate. You've built a very successful company. Did you ever think you'd run the process yourself?
It's funny because I am somebody who in my general life am quite unwilling to pay for professional services. I don't use a wealth manager. I think I can do that myself. Often when we were negotiating our contracts with customers, I would not run everyone by a lawyer. I'd say, okay, I've seen the markups we're going to get from lawyers. I know if we make this indemnity mutual, it's going to be fine. And so I'm very cost conscious. But for this particular one, I really did not consider doing it myself because, as I said earlier, I think, everyone involved in the company is smart people, but this is not a matter of just being smart. There's a lot of things where I did not know, and I don't think anyone on our team knew what good looked like in this process and the kinds of companies we should be reaching out to. And just some of those things, when you're in it, you understand the KPIs. You say, okay, if it's faster than this growth rate, you should get a 5 times multiple. And if it's in this particular TAM, you should get a 6 times multiple. So I think we did not look at doing it ourselves. We actually had one person who worked for us who was a former investment banker at another firm. We ended up not hiring his firm, even though we went through the discussions with them. But also the advice from him was saying, look, there's people who try and do it themselves, but they get half the valuation.
What was the benefit of working with Software Equity Group?
I think the best way for me to answer that is I can describe the offer that we got unsolicited prior to working with SEG, which I think is roughly what we could have done on our own versus where we ended up. So we had, from a company that I knew previously, an unsolicited inbound offer. And compared to where we ended up selling thanks to SEG, the value on that was less than half from a financial perspective. And it also was not actual liquidity. It was that we could roll over our current stock into a combination of another PE-backed company with a hope of gaining an eventual exit on that. By working with SEG, we were able to sell to a public company, so we got 100% cash on it, and we got more than twice the valuation.
For founders and CEOs who are in your spot a few years ago, that they're growing and scaling their business and they're considering an exit, what type of advice would you give them?
I would say that the advice of having a lot of conversations before you decide that you want to sell, of just getting, take advantage of all the expertise that people like SEG have to offer, saying, hey, what could I do to run my business better? Are there different customers I should be going after? If you look at our sales motion, what seems good? Where do our metrics seem off? Here's our infrastructure of tools that we use to manage the business. Do you have advice? Take advantage of that. But then think carefully before you actually enter the exit process. I can't say enough good things about working with SEG and what they did to mitigate the amount of time that I and my partners had to spend on it so that we continue running the business. Nevertheless, it is a significant investment of time. It's a significant investment emotionally. And I would go into it knowing what you really want to achieve. I think you need to go into it with conviction that if I hit my number, I do want to exit. And also knowing what things are important to you. Am I just trying to maximize the financial number? Is it important to me that all my employees will keep their jobs? Is it important to me that this business will be kept together versus, split up and managed in some different way? And also I would say, do I want to go with a strategic buyer who's going to buy 100%? Am I okay with a private equity buyer who only wants to buy 50% and I have to roll my equity over? Am I willing to continue to work at this company for 5 more years, or do I only want to work there for 6 months and I'm really looking to get out of it? I think if you don't know that up front, then you're going to get those questions and it's going to come across poorly if you're sort of waffling and lack conviction and you're trying to give the answer that you think the buyer wants to give. I think you really need to know that up front and feel very comfortable communicating it both to your bankers and to your buyers, because there's a buyer for every company out there, but you might not end up with the right buyer if you don't really know what you're trying to accomplish at the end.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you.